Hi, I'm Megan Beck. I'm the Chief Products Officer of AIMatters, and I'm here today with our chairman, Barry Liebert, and we're going to talk about how AI is changing consulting. So we're going to cover why is this happening now, right? So what's happening in the technological space, and what are some examples of how artificial intelligence is changing highly skilled industries with highly trained workers where we might not expect to see AI making inroads right away. We're going to talk about a use case. How have we used AI at AIMatters? Barry and I have had to make this transition from consultants to, let's call them technology partners with artificial intelligence. And then what can a company do who wants to make inroads in the AI space? So that's what we're going to cover. We're happy to take your questions throughout, so please offer them up, and we'll interrupt ourselves to address them right away. But I'm going to hand it off to Barry to talk about why AI is changing knowledge workers today.
Thanks, Megan. So if we think about AI as a profound technology in today's world, there's some major things happening. We're not going to cover the size of AI, but we're going to cover two big case studies, how it's impacted the financial services industry, and now for all of us that are paying attention, what does it mean to professional services? And as ex-consultants, Megan from Bain, myself from McKinsey, this has a profound impact. Not to forget the fact the size that the consulting industry is about a $250 billion industry. So if you think about it for a second, we would not have understood the fact that robots can fundamentally alter things. Now, we understand it takes place on the factory floor, and we see how machines have fundamentally altered the manufacturing of cars. But to replace humans with machines that do knowledge work, well, that's a big question for us all. So let's look at one industry, financial services. The financial services industry is massive. It's about $147 trillion in assets under management. And about 50 years ago, a guy by the name of John Bogle, the chairman and CEO, now retired of Vanguard, thought, wow, we can fundamentally alter the price point of financial services and financial service consultants. And what did he do? He basically made available indexing, or ETFs, as a fundamental way to do what's called a step change in the offering of products and services to you and me. Now, that big step function fundamentally changed forever the economics of what's called active management, or think of it as active consulting, me advising you on what types of stocks and bonds you should pick to put in your portfolio. He dropped the price point so much that about 30% of all assets under management are now in index or ETF funds. Now, that's really cool when you think about it, because all of us now have access to making really good decisions. But about 10 years ago, something fundamental changed again in terms of a step function. We moved from index or passive investing to machine-based decision-making called robo-advisors. So we moved from financial advisors to passive products to now robo-advice, machine-led advice. So what's happened in the last 10 years with robots? Well, really cool again. In a step function change, about $300 billion of assets under management are now being managed automatically by machines, by startups like Wealthfront and Betterment. So robots have replaced what was once financial advisors. And in doing that, it changed the cost structure again, fundamentally. Now, that's interesting. But the real question is, has anybody followed suit? And the really big companies have. The biggest institutional investor, BlackRock, introduced machines last summertime. Schwab has its own robo-advisor. But they're not alone. In the hedge fund industry, you have this massive group of machine learning companies like Two Sigma that manages about $55 billion using machines. And in the high-frequency trading area, you have Renaissance Technology with about $70 billion of assets under management using machines. So when you think about it, we've moved from, in the financial services, people to passive to machines that fundamentally alter how you and I invest. And for good reason. What it says is that we're going to go from $300 billion in assets under management, and in less than 8 years, we're going to not grow by one-fold or two-fold, but by 20-fold to $7 trillion in assets under management managed by machines. Now come back to Megan and myself. We're strategy consultants from McKinsey and Bain, and we're thinking, wow, could we imagine Amazon fundamentally altering the economics of consulting? What would they do, like they're going to do in healthcare, to alter the economics on a step function basis, to alter the economics of professional services for decision making, like who do I hire? What marketing program should I offer? How should I invest in products or services? Which manufacturing facilities? Think about all those decisions and think about this. There are 7 million businesses in the United States with 114 million people making decisions every day. Why not offer them robo-advice using machines to make it faster, better, cheaper to access what only McKinsey and Bain offer to large institutional companies? Well, let's look at the numbers there too. In the United States, corporations, whether we understand this or not, are more than just operating entities. They do more than just sell products and services. They are, in fact, institutional investors. They allocate capital every day. The number is massive, about $650 billion to decisions like who to hire, where should I locate my plant, property, and equipment, what marketing program should I use. So they're spending about $650 billion a year making what's called capital decisions. And those capital decisions are the crux of who they are at the board. Now here's the real problem with that. Only about 8% of companies in the United States are active reallocators. That means they keep doing, I know all of your companies the same way, because here's the statistics, keep doing the same thing year to year and hope, oh my God, maybe I'll get something different, which we know is the definition of insanity, but I'm going to keep doing the same thing. I'm going to build another store and hope I'm going to be an e-commerce retailer. Or I'm going to basically offer doctors, but I'm not going to do it online. Or for that matter, I'm going to build another car and not offer autonomous driving. Now, if we wonder why Ford and GM are falling behind Tesla, it's because they haven't been active reallocators. And Walmart is only now an e-commerce player. They weren't active reallocators. So we thought, okay, we're going to be Amazon. We're going to think about how do we use machines to offer 115 million people real-time advice that would fundamentally be available at scale by machines, a step function change. And as you can imagine, that was not easy for Megan and myself, given we were trained to think, wow, we're McKinsey and Bain. We know it all. Well, maybe we don't. Turn it back to Megan.
Thanks. So I'm going to talk about what we've done at Open Matters and what our journey to artificial intelligence has looked like. So Barry's kind of covered the why now. Whoops, let's see. All right, now, how did we do it? So Open Matters started with a very simple hypothesis, and that's that companies are one of 4 business models, okay? So they can be assets, services, tech, or network. So every company, and it depends on what they invest in, is a profile of these 4 business models. And that's our original thesis and what we bring to the market as consultants. So we started out trying to figure out what can we bring to companies around these 4 business models in order to figure out, hey, a single company, what do they look like? Are they perhaps mostly assets, a little bit services, a little bit tech, and maybe a sliver of network as well? This is our goal output, and with this, we can tell companies what their economic performance is likely to be. What is the trajectory of each of these business models? What does their industry look like and their top competitors? So we have this technology, we have this IP, and we offered it to the market in a very service-oriented way. Barry and I and some analysts looked at the financial reports for thousands of companies, came up with our perspective on what their business models were, and used it to make recommendations on what your trajectory and your economic outcome is likely to be. And we took it to the market. And people were very interested. They thought, this is exciting. I can see myself. I can see some of my competitors in my industry. But just a couple questions. And we kept getting the same questions over and over again. So the first question we kept getting was, hey, can you compare me to Europe? Or can you compare me to another industry? How do I look compared to startups? And each time we had to say, well, we looked at thousands of companies, but we didn't look at that exact setup. So give us a couple months and we'll do the analysis and we'll come back to you. That's not a great customer experience. Another thing we frequently got is, can you tell me who made this chart? I'd really like to talk to them about this asset piece because I think you've got my company wrong. You're calling us asset, but really we're services and technology. And so we had to continually defend our analysis. And that makes for a very rich discussion. But we thought at some point, wouldn't it be great if there were a technology, a smart machine that would be more defensible? So we started incorporating artificial intelligence into our approach. And that's a very difficult thing for Barry and I, long-term consultants, to say that all these brilliant ideas happening in our brain that we bring to clients could actually be supported by an AI. We had to shift our mental models. But we did. So we started investing in artificial intelligence. We got some smart people on board. We made use of tools on the market, ready-made tools, like RStudio and TensorFlow. We learned terms like logistic regression and lasso regularization and neural networks. And when we started applying them. And what we did is we came up with an artificial intelligence that could look at these 4 business models and create this output for us automatically and extensively. And we could bring this to our clients. And we found that this had a lot of advantages. So advantage number 1 is scale. It is very easy to scale our algorithm up to new markets, new geographies, new customers. And so when somebody said, Megan, can you tell me what this looks like in Europe? I'd say, yes. Yes, we've applied it to Europe. They have financial reports too, and this is the outcome. So we were very quickly able to scale our IP a lot further. The next advantage was defensible. So when somebody said to me, Megan, I think you have me wrong. We're not really an asset builder. It was still a rich conversation. And I could say, well, our algorithm, which has studied millions of companies, now our algorithm says these 4 things are very indicative of a company's tendency to use assets as opposed to other asset types. What do you think about that? Because you don't use any of those assets. And then it was very illustrative and helpful to both us and to the organizations to say, why is our business model what it is? And using an external insight that's not prone to human biases. Then the third one is new insight. So when we apply our artificial intelligence to our enormous data set, we use annual reports, language used by corporations, financial metrics, and outcomes. When we apply our fancy artificial intelligence to this data, occasionally it would tell us something we didn't know. And that was pretty exciting. Sometimes it would tell us things and we'd say, I think you have it wrong, machine, try again. But sometimes we would say, we never realized that that financial metric was so important to business model. And so we were able to refine our models and learn new things. So over the course of the past 4 years, Barry and I have, for a large part, translated what was happening in our brains as we analyze companies and business models into a smart machine, which can now do this highly analytical piece independently. Now, a question we get frequently is, so do you need each other anymore? Do we need people in this company? And of course we do. The machines aren't quite there yet. And there's a lot of things that people still do better than machines. Admittedly, there's a lot of things machines do better than people. So Barry and I still, of course, we provide the hypothesis, we refine the output, and we bring it to our clients, hopefully in a way that makes it impactful and useful to the client. Let's take a question.
So one of the questions that we got that relates to what you're just saying is, what are the most important skills that future consultants should have?
That's a great question.
Go for it, Megan.
I love that question. So I do think that a familiarity with the technology is important for everyone. Luckily, new upcoming consultants usually have an advantage here compared to long-term, sorry,
Be
Barry.
careful there, Megan.
Yes, sorry. A lot of people know the technology. It's great to have some familiarity with artificial intelligence. As AI starts taking over some of the more analytical parts of the job, what's going to be really important is the human component. So understanding your client and their perspective in a deep way, your client's personal view, what they're trying to accomplish, what their goals are, and also the change management piece. That's a big failing of many consulting firms, is they create a beautiful solution that can never be implemented, that simply is impossible given the client organization.
And what we're finding is something we've written about before, is that we really believe that AI can be used in a way that people aren't thinking about, which is empathy, right? So we all understand that empathy, which is about human interaction, is a critical component, but we've not really fully cherished it in a way that can fundamentally be leveraged. Now that we can turn analytics to a machine, we can begin to develop a skill that has traditionally been primarily females we've written about into a more scalable and more valued solution, which is, how do I empathize with you in a way that allows you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve? Should we go on or take another question? Okay. So let us tell you what you should do next, and I'll start, and Megan, you can chime in. What I'm going to cover is, first of all, boards and management team and leaders. Business model change is a really difficult process. It's fundamentally very hard for people who have run their businesses for a very long time in the same way. And that's hard because what happens is, when I've done something the same way over and over again, take Amazon, I've been building e-commerce, or take Walmart, I've been building stores, or professional consulting firms, I've been selling hours, or car companies, I've been selling cars. For you to say to somebody, I need you to change your mental model, is a very difficult thing. I need you to invest in something you've never invested in, whether it be online or artificial intelligence or machine learning or robots. This is a new way for being in the world. So the first thing is you need board buy-in. You need CEO and leadership buy-in. Because if not, to the new business model, you won't get the amount of capital you need invested in this new way of running your business. And you won't be able to fully figure out what the business case is for, like we have figured out the business case for why artificial intelligence produces a better, more scalable result with a step function to traditional consultants. That's number one.
All right.
Board buy-in.
So I'm going to put that over here. One, board, and I'll include LT.
Okay? And leadership team buy-in.
Yep. So people have to recognize the value that this technology is going to bring and be willing, as Barry brought up earlier, be willing to put some money into it, to reallocate their capital in a different way that's going to create a different outcome. The second piece is find your application. What are you going to use AI to do? Now, in our case, AI is very good at classifying, and it's very good at predicting. So we're using artificial intelligence right now to classify companies into business model, and probably in the future we're going to extend that into predicting trajectories. That calculation we do analytically still ourselves. But to find the application, and it's going to have to be a place where you already have a lot of data. Data is the the feed that AI consumes in order to create insight. So you're going to need to find a place where you're already collecting data or begin to collect that data so that you can feed it into your application in order to predict something, in order to make a recommendation to your customers, to target advertising. You can use it internally, but you need something small and something that the LT is going to buy into.
And that leads us to the third thing. For most companies, what we had to figure out too, if you think about the two of us, we're a startup with about 10 people. We had to shift fundamentally our competencies, right? Which is not just our business model, but we had to make a decision. Are we going to build it? Are we going to buy it? Or are we going to partner with a startup that has it? And that was hard for us, right? To think, okay, hold on, there's three different strategies by which we can fundamentally alter the way we do things. Could we find a startup that's already doing something like this? Because the idea of displacing a $250 billion industry, the way John Bogle did when he built Vanguard, when he displaced the financial services industry, and we're trying to displace the professional services industry, that's a really big question. And so we had to think, okay, we're going to build it, buy it, or partner it. And I think for all of you, you have to ask the exact same question. Do you have a board or an investor like our team that's willing to put your capital at risk to build it and the competencies you need to build it? Or do you want to basically partner with somebody that already has it, a tech firm that's built solutions in the artificial space that will allow you to basically roboticize or robotize, if there's such a word, your basic business process, whether it be marketing or HR or IT or production, all those things. Or the third thing is, are you going to buy it? And what do I mean by that? So there are, like in the financial services industry, startups in this space in which they are being gobbled up by companies like Salesforce and Microsoft and Amazon and Apple. It's clear that the big five platforms, you all know who these companies are gobbling up the AI space. But it would be a mistake for you not to understand, just like we went from physical to the web and from the web to machine, that you can't do this. In fact, you have to do this. You have to decide as a build, partner, or buy. And that's something I think each of you need to think about as you do this. Viewer question.
How do you see AI and humans coexisting in the future? And we also got a question about the role of emotions and emotional intelligence in that relationship.
Do you want to take emotions first, or with the other one, I'll take emotions? It's up to you, Megan.
I'll start with emotion.
Okay, go for it.
Emotional intelligence is important, and it's one of the things that machine learning and AI are going to be last to accomplish. So as our roles evolve, and there's some great research around this, most jobs are going to change because artificial intelligence will be able to do many of the repetitive and even the highly analytical and tailored analysis that consultants, financial advisors, and knowledge workers in general do. So that's going to leave the piece of human interacting to us, which is great because that's something humans are generally pretty good at. So I recommend definitely investing in your emotional intelligence, and you actually can train on it and improve your EQ. And so it's a great place to differentiate yourself as your role is evolving due to AI over the next decade.
And the other question, I think, is a really good one as well. So we're optimists, right? We wouldn't be here thinking we're not happy about the fact that we're displacing ourselves. So we're optimists. What we've learned in this transition is that we still add a lot of value. As we've talked about, the data is the fuel for machines. What we've also learned is something really powerful, is that there are what's called training data sets. This was a big learning for us a few years back. When we fed the machine with all this massive data, we have 4,000 variables across 45,000 companies. Just think about the size of those pivot tables Megan used to try to generate from me.
Very painful.
It was very painful, right? To break our systems. And it also broke with something called RStudio. It wasn't able to keep up, before we moved to something called TensorFlow, which is Google's product, which is what beat AlphaGo. So if you think about this for a second, it's critically important to, when you build training data, that when the machine delivers something, that your people can look at this and say, well, does that make sense? Does it make sense? Do I need to change something? And the interactions between humans and machines, as we've seen on the factory floors, will exist in the professional services and knowledge working environment. But it's going to be a fundamental shift in the way you, all of you who are watching today, think about your careers and your companies. Viewer question.
Can you give an example of an asset-based business as well as a network-based business?
Yeah, absolutely. So an asset-based business is a company that focuses on physical things. It can be products that are manufactured, that are dug out of the ground, that are produced, or even sold in a store. So going through that chain, Exxon extracts from the ground, GE is a manufacturer, although among other business models, and Walmart is a retailer. The network side, the network companies focus on providing a space for interaction between people, or occasionally machines. So companies in that space would be Airbnb, Uber, Facebook, Yelp. Credit card companies and financial exchanges are some of the oldest network orchestrators, but those companies provide a platform, and the network provides the service, product, or idea that is exchanged.
And what's so interesting about that is every company, and we mean every company, has at its core a set of suppliers and a set of customers. But they've never thought of themselves as platform companies. They've thought of themselves as product or service companies. I sell you something, a product or a service, and I deliver it, whether it be as a retailer, distributor, or manufacturer. In today's platform network-centric world, to get the economics of what's called near zero marginal cost, you need to fundamentally change the way you think of your business. Say, how am I going to connect my suppliers to my customers so they can serve themselves? Viewer question.
But before we do that, if you want to learn more about business model and business model transformation, it's in our book, The Network Imperative.
Great, Megan.
Yeah, don't want to forget that one.
Go for it.
Can you talk a little bit about the biases that can potentially creep in when you're training a machine learning algorithm?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very important question. And so the machine learning is only as good as the data we feed into it, of course. And we've seen this in many spaces, in medicine and lots of applications where the human training data has an inherent bias that then is perpetuated by the machine learning system. So the best thing you can do is try to create unbiased data. So don't feed into your machine learning system any fields or data that you think could be biasing. For example, if you were doing a medical application, you in some instances might exclude race, or you might exclude income. So the same thing with us. What we feed into our system is strictly financial data and company reported data and language, and we try, when creating our training data, to focus on very defensible things such as revenue allocation between product lines. And one thing we hope, of course, is that in the aggregate, some of the natural errors are going to be smoothed out, but it certainly is something to be aware of. And that's one of the reasons why we keep retraining our data over time.
And you have to accept the fact that there is bias in even data. So let's take a simple example that relates to that question, Walter, which is very simply, in the data we're using, which is the best data that's available, though the machine learning team does not like it, it's every piece of data ever reported by every company basically since 1960. Well, here's the problem in that training data. GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles, provides preference or bias towards assets, and it categorizes us as expenses, employees as expenses. Well, there's a natural bias. I don't think I'm an expense. I don't think Megan's an expense. And I'm not sure that the chair that Walter's sitting on is an asset and he's an expense. But that's the way the information is reported. So you have to basically look at the underlying data and say, does this data make sense? And does it have underlying biases that are unconscious in the way it's reported by companies or countries?
Yeah, that's a great point. Even the omission of data. Companies report much more directly on assets and services than they do on the creation of new tech or on the network they manage and orchestrate. So we have to be really creative in trying to find the right factors to help key in on those business models.
So as you can see, this is not as easy a task as one might imagine. As you begin to build out your machine learning system, even looking at whatever data you do have, you need to fundamentally think about what data do I need and is it all available to me? One thing we've also found is that we need both our publicly traded data, which is massive in portfolio and size, but you also need corporate data that is proprietary so that companies can begin to put their own data and provide training algorithms to it so that we can basically have machines, just like you and I are giving data to Google or Facebook so it can learn on us. We have to do the same thing. We have to let it learn on companies. Question, Walter.
What can someone who's not in IT or not yet technical learn about AI to get an edge in the job market?
That's a great question. And you know, a lot of this is not happening in IT. IT tends to be a support function rather than an initiator of new ideas and new technology, which is very important. You know, it's a valuable organization in any company, but it's not often the place that where this sort of innovation happens. So it depends on what your use case is. You could be a creator of IT. You could be somebody like our tech guy, Frank, who learns about our studio, coding, start using TensorFlow. There's a wealth of free tools out there. Even just the understanding of what tools are available and what are the highlights of the technologies they use would be great for any business person trying to bring recommendations back to their leadership team on what sorts of technology could quickly be implemented in order to start creating some insight. So just even a small level of familiarity can be useful in the business context and for generating new ideas. And if you want to get into the depth, goodness knows there is strict, really tight competition for AI talent these days.
And part of that is there's no shortages, both at HBR and other places, of education about AI. I mean, there's a lot of articles about AI that you can read about. And the good thing is the major providers of AI tools, as Megan said, are basically making it available for free. They're trying to do the same thing they did for the internet. Google, we're using Google Compute and TensorFlow. There is no shortage from the major players, from Microsoft, Google, things like that, that are making their algorithms available for you to try in your company. And they're smart in that regards. They're trying to get their machines to learn from you and I. And if they can get us to use it, their machines get smarter, which means their applications scale faster, and they get more people to deploy it. So as we said, getting into the game is part of the entire process. Any other questions from the audience? Here's one.
We had a question about sort of what the new McKinsey or the new Bain or BCG, the new consulting model will be. You've touched on that a little bit, but maybe you could lay out sort of maybe further in the future what you see the kind of consulting model of the future looking like.
Sure, yeah. I think we're going to see consultants supported by artificial intelligence tools. Right? So, you know, having worked in consulting, I know one of the things that clients love to have is benchmarks and comparing their company to the organizations around them in their industry and beyond. And a lot of that data is available, but consulting firms have not been very good at collecting it and putting it together in a valuable way. For example, understanding the business model or many other factors, the operating model of different companies. So I see first it coming in almost as a benchmarking support tool where you can look at your company's profile versus others in the industry. Probably then it will go deeper into capital allocation and best practices. And I see in the future consultants using these tools and helping their clients interpret the insight and then take action.
Yeah, I think my view is it will follow the financial services industry. I think we're going to see, in the same way of saying, we're going to see our companies, the ones we trained at, go from high-priced, high-touch consultants that are high cost, that really take almost forever to get an answer to a client, millions of dollars, to something like what John Bogle did. We'll see a low-cost solution, a benchmarking solution, like companies' executive board or advisory board, which are quite successful enterprises providing low-touch, low-cost, and then providing what's called robo-advice. So I think you'll see a multi-model solution, no different than what you're seeing in the financial services industry, offer that type of business model.
We're probably going to see a new SaaS, which is strategy as a service, don't you think?
Absolutely.
A subscription-based software strategy product.
Go for it, Walter.
How can these technologies and methods be applied in the context of startups?
Oh, fantastic.
Startups are lucky because they're starting fresh, right? It's the big organizations that have trouble mobilizing around this. Why don't you talk about that, Barry?
Sure. So the good news is, I hate to say this, but strategy is a known commodity now. We know the business models. We've looked at all 45,000 companies. We understand the archetypes of business models. We understand the archetypes of the underlying capabilities and assets that are necessary to construct these things. So as a startup, what I would suggest you do is understand what type of business models are available for you to build. There's a great article, a good piece now written by Amazon that says, right, hard things, literally physical things like this, are hard to build, other than for Elon Musk, who did that yesterday, right? For most organizations, building hard assets is hard things, right? Soft assets are hard too, but they're not as expensive. Intellectual assets are easier. So my view is if you're a startup company, you need to build the most valuable business model. Today, that's a platform and a network. You need to think about how to mobilize that from an economic perspective to get people to want to be on your platform. And although Amazon and Microsoft and Apple all have the biggest platforms, there are platform opportunities for almost every type of industry that are microservices based. And so I think if you're building a business model, make sure you build the right one and build it for the most value. Question.
We've had a couple of questions related to younger generations. So maybe as a closing question, what advice would you give to college students, people just starting out in their career in terms of positioning themselves for the era of artificial intelligence?
Go for it, Megan. You're a younger person.
Very young. So this is a great question as well. And one thing that's been clear to me is that some background in technology never hurt anybody in this marketplace. I happen to study computer science as an undergrad. I haven't worked in the industry for a decade, maybe longer, but that knowledge is still applicable and still useful, and it allows me to take quickly to these new things. So not everybody needs to be a computer science major, but while you're in school, take advantage of the opportunity you have to build a foundational level of knowledge on key things like software, media, and digital tech. So that's one thing to do. The other thing to do is realize that this is not specialized anymore. Technology is no longer just the domain of IT. Everybody throughout the organization, from the administrative assistants up to the partnership level, the chairman of the board, need to understand how technology works and influences their business. Everybody is using it. It's as simple as, would you expect anybody to not know how to use Microsoft Word? No, of course not. It's a foundational technology to doing business today, and so is artificial intelligence. You don't need to know how to implement it, but you need to know how it works and where it's applicable.
So I'll wrap up for a second, and let's leave Megan with closing thoughts. For someone who's my generation, a little bit older than Megan, I think it's incumbent upon all boards, which is what I serve, to fundamentally think about the following. If every organization is a tech organization at its core, and if data is the fuel of a tech organization, whether it be social information or financial information or customer information or marketing information, at the core, every company is a data company. Even if it hasn't stored the data yet in a profound and simple way to access, every company is a data company. And the only way to mine that data at scale is to use artificial intelligence. And if you think about the big platforms today are doing just that. They're mining our data to help us make better purchasing decisions on Amazon, to make better connection decisions on Facebook, to make better viewing decisions on Netflix. And so every company needs to think of itself as a platform and a network. And from a board perspective, I would suggest that every board member, every leader needs to think about, how do I move my company there? I'll turn to Megan for final comments about what does the organization need to do to finally move in this direction.
They need new talent. That's a key piece of it. And just to recognize that artificial intelligence is the new steam engine, right? You wouldn't keep operating in the industrial age thinking you're just going to buy more horses and you're going to keep up with your new competitor. Now your competitors are moving to artificial intelligence. It's more scalable, it's more robust and defensible, and it helps generate new insight. So you need to have it too. It's a new technology, but it's a foundational technology for all organizations.
Thank you very much for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you all again soon.